Welcome everyone to another episode of the Terrain Studio. I'm your host, Shawn Morris. Today on the Terrain Studio, I have a new segment for you called Hobby Shop. And the effective principle of this segment is going to be talking about things that I've purchased for the studio for various uses, as well as highlighting some new products that I, in fact, may have not even used myself. So I'll draw specific attention to those, just because I won't have as much experiential knowledge to kind of share with you on those. But I wanted to highlight things that I was purchasing for the studio, whether for projects or for upcoming tutorials, just for full transparency's sake, and just to kind of give you an idea of some of the things that I, in fact, experiment with here myself. So the range that I'm going to show you here today is primarily AK Interactive products, and typically what I'll do when I go ahead and order from a hobby store is I'll kind of look at a particular line and I'll walk through the product line and pick up things that I think are either of interest or of use for me in the studio. Typically, different products will have a variety of sort of types that you can buy. So you can certainly get AK Interactive products, but you can probably find a Vallejo equivalent. Likewise, you can get a Woodland Scenics product and probably find like a Hecky or a Knock equivalent as well. So don't think that the brands that I'm showing you here are the only ones that you can get. Mostly let's focus on the actual products themselves. So for the very first series here, I'm just going to kind of show you again just some things that I picked up. Primarily they're weathering materials for this one, but not all these segments will feature weathering materials. It could be a scratch building episode or maybe more scenic elements, but this one here, like I said, primarily focused on weathering. So the very first product we're going to look at is the AK Interactive Fresh Mud. You probably see me use this product in the mud tutorial, so if you go back and find that video, you can certainly find this. These bottles themselves, just to kind of highlight them a little bit, they're 35 ml bottles. They last quite a bit. They are enamel pigments, so when you're using them, they have a little bit of an odor, so just kind of keep that in mind. But I really find that these work super nice to actually work in conjunction with other scenery elements. So you can use these to either dye or tint ground effects. You can mix these with acrylic pastes to give them a different color. I often mix this with the Vallejo acrylic paste, so even though they're not the same product line, there's certainly some interactions that you can mix in and amongst these. An acrylic an acrylic ink or wash, as opposed to an enamel wash, is going to be a little bit more thin. I find that the enamel is a little bit heavier on the pigment side. Likewise, they're a little bit shinier when you use them, so just kind of keep that in mind that you may need to dull this stuff down. So that's the acrylic mud. We also have here, I just have to spin them around for me to read them. Here we have, this is an enamel wash. This is actually labeled as brown blue, and this is an enamel wash that's usable for gray vehicles. So the nice thing about the AK Interactive line is they have a range of washes, filters, and pigments that you can use, and they kind of give some instruction in terms of what best they work on. So for example, if you're doing a lot of gray things, for example, I was going to be painting the tank for Star Wars Legion, this gray wash is going to be instrumental in achieving some depth and just add a little bit of a grungy look to an otherwise gray-based vehicle. So that's what I plan to use this one here for. Next up we have Streaking Grime, and this again is for Panzer Gray. So sticking in line with that that project that I was just talking about, this is going to give that streaking look. It's got a kind of a brownish rushed tinge to it, so this will be certainly usable around any of the exhaust ports or gears, and any of the panels that you could have some streaking effect. So when you're using these streaking materials, one of the things, or even the washes for that matter, one of the products that I found work really well with this is actually this one here. It's coming up. It's the AK Interactive White Spirits. Now you can use paint thinner, and I have used paint thinner before. However, I just don't find that it works as nicely as the White Spirits. I will give this disclaimer: the White Spirits is significantly more cost heavy than buying a thinner. So if you want to go ahead and try thinner first, that's fine. If you want to give the White Spirits a go, I had a bottle, I used it all up. However, it took me several years to get through the entire bottle. If you're doing a lot of grime and streaking effects, you'll go through it a bit quicker. However, you only need a little bit of this and it goes a long way. So what you do is you put down your streaking grime or your washes, and you can leave them, and I've left them over 24 hours, even longer. You go in with the white spirits, and what you do is you reflood the area that you've applied the weathering material to. And then what you can do is this effectively dilutes and pulls off the excess material. So you can use as much or as little white spirits as you want to either subtract or even basically bring down to almost nothing. You can almost erase the weathering application if you want. So if you've made a mistake, or if you've got an area that you didn't want to have any of the weathering material, the white spirits will help you pull that off as well. And it doesn't ruin or wreck any of the undercoated paint or primed paint. So the combination of these two works wonders. And if there's any interest, perhaps I can do a tutorial on just small panels. If you're thinking about this for like other elements, like say building elements or things like that, the combination of these two with the exact same application process that I've talked about would work as well. So that's white spirits, and again, it works with almost all of the AK stuff. Next up, we have the Earth Effects. Again, this is in the AK enamel line. I also use this on the mud tutorial. The Earth Effects is probably one of those sort of middle of the road ones. I really like it. I got another bottle staring at me in the face just here off camera. It's a really neutral color. In terms of a natural Earth Effects color, it's kind of like a chocolatey brown, but a little bit lighter. So this is a nice base layer if you kind of want to mix this into your ground effect, and then you can use either a fresh mud or a dry mud or something along those lines to either bring up or highlight down your base layer, depending on what the undertone or what saturation you're looking for in terms of your earth level. But I really like this. It's much like I like Vallejo Dirt, the color, just as a nice neutral starting point for my ground effects. So this right here, again, I use this if I want to add a little bit more depth and I have the ground cover a little bit thicker, a little bit chunkier ground cover. Typically, if I'm just doing like a flat sort of packed earth, I'll just do a paint. But if I want to give a little bit of depth to something that's got a little bit more substance, I'll go with the AK Interactive Earth Effects. Okay, a couple more AK products we have here. This is Damp Earth. Again, this works in conjunction with the fresh mud that I talked about before. The fresh mud is certainly going to be a little bit more of a wet look, and then the damp earth would be a nice transition as you move into a dry area. So if you're looking kind of for that fresh space, and then your transition out where you're going to have maybe perhaps not as much upturned earth with the fresh look, and then you start getting into that damp look as you trail off, and probably can trail off into just a plain old earth effect. So there's no coincidence that I have these in conjunction. Certainly you could use them all together if you want to kind of go for a more damp and dry look here, if you want to go for a more damp and fresh look here. These two together wouldn't be terrible. You just probably want to create a little bit of a gradient transition between the fresh and the dry, and the earth effects. So the line is great. There's lots of combinations that you can use. I just sort of really have found that these ones here have worked nicely. It's no coincidence that I buy this group or this combination quite frequently. Next up here, we just have some pigment fixer rather. This is an AK product. You can get this in several other brands as well. So this is one of those examples of a product that is widely available. Like I said, I was just happened to be buying AK products. So I went and ordered that. The pigment fixer works exactly as described. It works with pigments. Now, when you're applying pigments, you can do that in several applications. So when you're applying a pigment, and if you're not sure what I mean by a pigment, let me just grab one here off camera. This is not part of the hobby shop, so this wasn't just purchased, but let's just talk about it for full transparency here. So the Vallejo pigment will work fine with the AK pigment fixer. That's fine. You can also get AK pigments, or you can get Vallejo pigment fixer. But what you do with the pigment is a dry powder. You can can apply the dry powder straight out of the bottle onto whatever you're trying to weather. You can also do an overspray or a mist of just plain water, and you can apply your pigment that way. And you can actually apply the water first, pigment second, or pigment first and then water saturate it after. There's various ways to apply pigment. I like the pigment fixer, but I don't use the pigment fixer in straight application. I typically cut it myself with 50-50 water and pigment fixer. And I like that because it A, makes the pigment fixer go a little bit farther, and 2, I find that I can get a little bit more of a fluid mist if I dilute it with water, and it doesn't have so many hot spots. So the pigment fixer will hit your pigment. It will certainly darken the color instantly as the powder sort of absorbs the moisture, but then what happens is it evaporates, it locks into your material. If you want to apply a pigment in a little heavier concentration, you can build up layers of pigment, or you can go ahead and apply the powder dry straight out of the bottle with a paintbrush. You can kind of build it up, and then if you take a dropper or even a paintbrush, you can take some pigment fixer and you can just wick it into the powder. I don't recommend dropping it on, but if you hit the edge of the pigment, it will wick right through the pigment. As I said, it will saturate, it will lock it in, and then it will dry, and then you'll have that buildup of pigment. I do recommend, if you're going to build it up in any substantial thickness, to lock it in twice. So apply your pigment fixer or your combination of water or pigment fixer in 2 applications, just to make sure that you get both a penetration and then a surface level of a drying. Basically you want to lock it in. So make sure that if you're using a pigment fixer and you're applying your pigment thick, you do kind of 2 layers. Otherwise, just a straight mist and locking in your light layer of pigment works perfectly fine. I will be 100% honest. I don't lock in my pigments all the time with a pigment fixer. Oftentimes what I'll do is I'll wait until the very end, until I do a matte seal or a dull coat, and I just rely on that aerosol sort of, or even airbrushed on sealer to be enough to lock the pigment in. So again, you do not have to do your pigments with a pigment fixer. There's lots of applications, but that's just one example, and I do want to show it because I do use it particularly when I'm building up pigments in sort of in and around buildings or structures. I don't often want to mist my whole building and apply the pigment, because the pigment is it's very light. It's basically a powder. If you're familiar with kind of like cosmetic powders, things like that, maybe your wife or girlfriend uses those for like on their face. That stuff gets everywhere, and it easily transfers from one surface to another. So the pigment fixer just prevents that from happening. What else do we have? We got a couple more AK products. Some of these I have used already, so the bottles aren't full, so I'm going to refrain from opening them all, but I will give you guys some footage and some stills in a later video, kind of to show you directly what I did with these. But this is one which is new, I have not used, and I have no real feedback to give on it, but I wanted to talk about it. So this is AK Interactive, Dark and Dry Crackling Effect. And this is in their diorama series. So if you haven't gone to their website and checked it out, I do highly recommend that. So they have this product line called Diorama. And at first I was a little skeptical in terms of like whether I would find it useful. I felt like, is this an attempt to kind of rebrand products and label them as diorama and then sort of like jack up the price, and so people can see, oh, I'm doing a diorama, so I need this. It's not the case of that at all. And 1, they don't sponsor the video. 2, I paid full price for all this stuff. And if I'm giving this information, it's because it's honest information, and there's no ulterior motives here. So I want to be very clear about that. But this one here, I have no experience using. However, I did want to use this for, and I'm not doing a diorama with dry and dark crackling, but I did want to do some bases, and I wanted to see if it gave, because it's over a small surface area, I wanted to see if the look was going to be A, sufficient to achieve a crackling effect, and 2, if it was going to be able to lock in with any sort of longevity on such a smooth and small surface. I'm a little worried on the edges, because the edges are exposed and oftentimes you're picking up and handling a mini from the edges, if that's going to actually cause any flaking or damage. So that I will do a full experiment on, and I'll show you, but I did want to show you that I picked up this. I haven't even opened it, so this one I will open it because I'm kind of curious what the actual texture's like. Okay. That's interesting. All right, so it's very gelatinous, I guess. It has a little bit of a liquid layer on top. I'm going to guess that that's going to come off when I stir this. Just kind of quickly rotate this to the side. I didn't actually look at this. It doesn't say anything about stirring or anything right here. So I'll probably stir as opposed to shake. Close well for preservation, so that's kind of a given. It's very, very dark, and one of the things I want to talk about in these other products is make sure if you are ordering this stuff, or if you're ordering anything for that matter, make sure that you check the description in terms of the color. So this one here is described as dark and dry. It certainly is. It's got a really cool image on the side. I'm not sure if the glare will pick that up, but if that's anything like how it comes out, I'm very excited about seeing this. But what I wanted to say about this is just be very careful when you're ordering a product that they're not giving you a color image, and in fact the product itself is not actually colored. So that's a significant deterrent, because if you get something and then you have to color it, well, you have to understand what exactly you can color it with. Are you going to get any separation of color? Is it going to go in as one color and then dry as another? So you don't want to have any surprises like that, particularly if you're doing something quite substantial and significant, because any amount of work that you have to add is going to be compounded by the size of the project. But this one here is pleasantly surprised. Is very dark. I assume that it will dry a little bit lighter than that, because it does have that dry look. So I'm going to guess that once the moisture kind of evaporates off, it's significantly lighter than that dark color, but that remains to be seen. FYI, this is a 100 ml bottle. This is significantly smaller than some of the other products I'm going to show you, only because you're probably not doing substantially large areas with this. Even if you were doing a desert or dry scene, you'd probably use this more sparingly instead of covering an entire surface with this. So sticking with the diorama series, got a couple more to show you. In fact, I have 4 more products to show you. So let's just speak about these in turn, but I'll keep them all on camera just to make it a little bit more interesting. So what we have here is, in the diorama series, muddy ground terrain. So this is an acrylic paste. So it's very similar to some of the Liquitex stuff that I've shown you. It's very similar to the Vallejo stuff that I've shown you. And again, this stuff here is in various, I'll say, grades of thickness. So this one is not also open, but I will open this one too. The other ones I have already opened and used. These two are actually the same, but I'm going to open them because I think I have tinted one and not tinted the other. So this one right here, you can see, is very muddy. No surprise, it's going to work really nicely with the earth. It's going to work really nicely with the fresh mud, and it's going to work really nicely with the damp earth. So this actually has a texture. I'm going to move this around so you can kind of see that it does have some fluidity to it. There's the there's the lid, and it's very, very thick, nice and even to spread. So you can imagine if that was your surface, that's how it's going to kind of self-settle out. That's pretty awesome. If you're looking for a muddy ground effect, that's it. Obviously the shine's going to come off because that's moisture that you're seeing there. However, the color and the texture is going to be awesome. So I'm really excited for this. I can't possibly think about doing a muddy texture with a combination of products that would be easier than straight up application out of this. So again, full disclaimer, this stuff is not super cheap. So this is a 250 ml container. It is about $20. However, you can do, with 2 of these, you can cover a full 3x3 surface with multi-levels. So I'll say that a straight up 3x3 application, you're probably looking at about 1.5 of these to do any thickness, or if you have some additional, let's say some modular pieces that you want to add, 2 of these. So $40 to take a straight up container of ground cover. Cover your diorama or your play surface or your gaming table, whatever you're using, is not bad. If you were going to get acrylic paste, let's say the Liquitex, and then you had to add some ballast, so you're going to look at like $20-ish for the Liquitex. It'll be twice the size, so let's say $10. or I guess you one container. So $20, you're going to add some ballast in there. It's going to cost you about $15 for that. Plus your enamel, you're probably going to need 1 or 2 bottles of coloring pigment, whatever that is. So you're probably looking at about the same. However, you're getting a few products and you're going to have to worry about combinations and mixtures. So if you're looking for something of ease, and this is why I said at first I was a little skeptical, is this just a gimmicky line to save people time when really you can jack up the price? It's not that. It's a time-saving line that has a lot of engineering into it to make it into a great combination of effects that save you time. Don't cost you extra money, but save you time. And so, and I'm a terrain maker, and I'm still using it. So I'm just giving you that kind of disclaimer. Now, a couple others that we have is we have the neutral texture for earth, and then we have the rough texture. So let me just open up these. I said I wasn't going to open all these, and here I am opening them all anyway. So this one, I've actually pre-colored. However, I want to show you this. This is how this product comes. Now, when you look at the side, it kind of has a little bit of a color to it. It actually comes white, but it is texturized. And so this has a little bit of a grit in it, more so than the Vallejo paste. So the Vallejo paste is grainy. However, it's a little bit thinner of a grit. So I like it for basing. This stuff also would be suitable for basing. I just wanted to keep in mind, or let you guys know, that it's a little bit more grainy than the Vallejo. What I did with this is I actually straight up added paint and not enamel, and it held the color and it dried and it maintained the color and didn't have any separation. I didn't have any hot or cold spots. I didn't have any like sort of pooling of the paint or anything like that. It took the color and held it nicely. So that is the natural texture. I do find that the lids are a little stiff when they go back on. This one here, let me open this one just off camera because it is exceptionally sticky. This one here, again, mix it up. This one is, it's pretty close to the color that I showed you. I think this one ended up being a little bit darker. One thing that I will say is that in order to get the paint to be thoroughly mixed through this, I actually had to pour the contents into another container, mix it there, and dump it back in. I just couldn't get the paint to penetrate down to the bottom given the small size of the container. So that's just something to keep in mind. If you are going to mix up something like this, though, you're going to want to make sure that you do batches or make sure you mix extra. To match this later on would be very difficult because you'd have to have the exact same measurements. If you keep careful measurements, I don't typically do that. It would be fairly easy to match it. However, when I'm doing batches, I always try to mix up enough, if not a bit extra, to make sure that I don't run out. And then last but not least, in the same line was the neutral texture. So this is, when it applies neutral, that means it's coming in a white color. If it gives you an actual color like dark or muddy, that's going to be actually colored. So there's your trick and tip if you're looking at any of this. So this was the rough texture. The neutral texture was that sort of mid-range grit, and then the rough texture, there's not much left in here at all, but this is definitely a heavier texture. It comes in white as well. I've mixed that up. It's almost all gone though, and I will say this stuff was fabulous to work with. I will definitely work with it again. In matter of fact, I will probably find projects that will specifically streamline to use this, or that I can streamline by using this rather, because it's that easy to work with and it made my work significantly easier. I think it's fun to start with the neutral because you can then determine based on the rest of your palette what you want to use. So that's quite important. So keep in mind that if you want to change the color of things, you can certainly use the enamels. You can use paints. I probably wouldn't use just a wash. A wash is probably not going to be significant enough to penetrate the actual substance. However, you could certainly mix in some enamels or some paints to get sort of a colored look to that, and then do your washes and things like that over the top. Another distinct advantage of not just painting over this. So a lot of people may just wish to apply this and then a paint over top. However, if you ever have any chip or damage or delamination, you're going to end up with a very stark white surface underneath. And then what you're going to have to do is color match or paint chip match, and you're going to be constantly reapplying. If, however, you start with a base color by mixing in a color and you have any chip damage or cracking later on, it's just going to expose an undertone. So if your top layer is not significantly different, you're probably going to be able to live with that crack or chip. However, if it's white and your top layer is a brown, it's going to look pretty stark and probably not be that appealing. So I would always recommend coloring the neutral colors. It's up to you what color you want to use. Obviously, with the muddy ground, you can add a paint or a wash on it to tone it up or down as you see fit. So that is the AK line that I purchased here. As I said in the segment, we're going to call Hobby Shop, and that's effectively what it is. Here it is, me going out shopping for hobby supplies, and I want to kind of share with you both the background information I have on them, the reason that I get them, the rationale behind the purchase, or some of the excitement that I'm looking forward in terms of using them in the future. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed this segment here. I'm going to kind of keep them around 30 minutes or so. I'll stockpile more materials. I'm always shopping for new stuff. So if you see anything here that you have any questions about, comments about, experience using, definitely fire those in the comments below. This video is going to be on Patreon, but I'm also going to release this one to the public for the very first segment. I want to create a little bit of buzz around this, get people talking about what purchases they're making and what they're looking forward to using in their future upcoming projects. So thanks everyone for watching. This has been a TerrainStudio. If you're not a subscriber yet of the YouTube channel where this will be posted, certainly go and do that. That's a big help to me. I don't generate any ad revenue from that, but I do want to have people watching the videos. That's the true motivation and the factor that I make the videos for. Also, if you guys are so inclined, check out the Patreon. I do a number of videos on there, tutorials included, and these things right here are strictly and primarily used for the tutorials themselves. So it just helps me to sort of regenerate some revenue in terms of making the tutorials that you guys are excited about seeing. So hopefully you guys can check that out. I do appreciate any sort of support you can give. And if you're not able at this time, that's perfectly fine. You're enjoying this video, and I hope there will be more to come. Thanks for watching, guys. Catch you guys next time. Cheers.